What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to our podcast, The Gameplan. I'm Micah, that's Kris. And Kris, what has happened over the past weekend since the last time we recorded our podcast?
Well, we have our teams for the World Series, those being the Tampa Bay Rays winning in 7 games against Houston Astros, and then the Los Angeles Dodgers also playing 7 games. They'll be playing games starting Tuesday, October 20th, over in Texans, in Arlington, Texas, new ballpark, Globe Life Field. We also saw a couple of teams finally get wins, which were the New York Giants and the Atlanta Falcons both having wins. So now the Jets are the only 0-6 team right now, and we have 3 undefeated teams, which are the Tennessee Titans, the Pittsburgh Steelers, and the Seattle Seahawks.
Thanks, Kris. So today, guys, we are lucky to have another guest on our podcast. Today, for the rest of October, we're going to have different guests throughout each of those episodes. Without further ado, today's guest does not disappoint. He is a native of the Bay Area, as well as one of the best professors/mentors that I have had throughout my college career at Menlo College. He's intellectually gifted, reaching a pinnacle of academic success before the age of 30 and earning his PhD from the University of Michigan. He has authored/collaborated in a few sports analytic research articles and has been published in a good number of times in different academic journals as well. Please help me in welcoming Dr. Sean Pradhan.
Hey, thanks for having me on the podcast, guys. Appreciate it.
So what have you been doing to keep busy during the pandemic?
Oh, man. Really, it's just been work from home. So, I mean, Micah, you mentioned heavily involved in research. So I've been doing a lot of that. We'll probably get into that later.
Mm-hmm.
Now with the semester rolling, I mean, teaching, grading, just helping the students any way I can. I mean, at times it feels like you're never really off the clock, but I've gotten used to it. So been busy.
Yeah, what type of work have you been doing outside of just school?
So I mentioned my research. I collaborate with a lot of different professors and other professional colleagues at institutions like San Jose State. I still keep in contact with my University of Michigan professors, so work on stuff there. I've been also doing a lot of work through the San Jose State University Research Foundation at NASA Ames Research Center. So all kinds of research going on.
Yeah. When I first was introduced to you back in my sophomore year in 2017, I believe, you said that you first went into college wanting to get a degree in psychology, but then ultimately switched to sports management. Where did those paths cross, and where did the combination come from?
So, I mean, really, just to backtrack a little bit, yeah, I have a bachelor's in psychology from SF State, and then I have a master's in research and experimental psychology from San Jose State. And I guess that combination that you mentioned came from really my master's thesis, and I was studying San Francisco Giants fans, more so from a behavioral psychology perspective. And I realized, I want to continue with the research game, so to speak. And it really led me to blend those two things together, and it took me to sport management, where I got my PhD at the University of Michigan.
Nice. So you mentioned a little bit about your research as well. What are some of the research topics that you have formerly worked on and currently are working on?
Yeah, so I consider myself a pretty interdisciplinary researcher, just trying to blend my background in psychology to what I currently do in sport management. So specifically, though, I've researched how sponsorship initiatives, for instance, like in the NBA with their jersey sponsor patch program, how that affects sports fan consumer behavior, the impact of what athletes do, both on the field, if you think about their performance, and then even off the field. Just if you imagine an athlete committing domestic violence, or on the opposite end of the spectrum, engaging in pro-social work. So I've looked at how fans react to that, not only from the perspective of evaluating an athlete, but also how they go about purchasing products related to the team or making different product choices. More recently, though, I've been getting more into statistics and other analytical techniques to quantify team performance in a lot of different sports. Just a few months ago, I presented a project on how travel across different time zones could affect how NBA teams specifically perform in the playoffs. And generally speaking, it appears that westward travel tends to lead to decrements in play. And then just, lastly, given the current socio-political climate today, just with the Black Lives Matter movement, I'm actually currently working on a project with my former uh, doctoral advisor at the University of Michigan, and we're investigating how sports organizations, in particular, how their BLM responses on Twitter, how message content varies, even the length of the content. We're trying to determine, are there specific sport differences between the league? Is it based on the state or the origin of the team, and among other factors? So quite a lot around the board here.
Yeah, I think I remember the patch study that you were doing. I think you introduced that to us in our marketing class, I believe. Um,
Yeah.
what are some of your future projects that you want to look into?
So I mostly want to delve into more topics in sports analytics, try to expand that ground into other travel factors when it comes to team performance. So some ideas I've been throwing around or about maybe pursuing in the future might be looking at performance in the NFL, specifically during, let's say, the London games when they come back, or even Thursday night football, or playing on a short week. I've also thought about studying with another colleague of mine what validates a player in a sport. So really shows, when has an athlete, quote unquote, made it. Is it when they won their MVP, when they won the championship, their team made it to the conference finals, or is it something else, right? So really looking at how fans perceive the athletes from the marketing side of things and what kinds of implications there are.
That'd be actually really interesting to see how fans kind of just see their athletes and us from the outside of performance. And lastly, what are some of your researching pet peeves?
I guess when people try to mislead others with data and graphs specifically. So if you think about manipulating your axes, so let's say the y-axis to a great extent, let's say to show an otherwise like minuscule or really small result, I think that's just basically lying with data, and I really don't like that. I guess also not trying to apply a more appropriate statistical analysis to your data and sticking with something maybe more traditional. I think that's a bit lazy. I mean, you should definitely go about testing your data through graphs and conduct the appropriate checks before you do anything. And when you end up picking your statistical analysis, you better make sure it's the best option at hand. I think
Right.
those are my main two.
Huh. All right, Chris, take it over.
Okay, so you are from the Bay Area and you've been working in sports. Do you have favorite teams? Are they here in the Bay Area? Like, what is your favorite sport? And just kind of list your teams from there too.
I guess my top sport has got to be the NBA. And for the NBA in particular, my team's the Golden State Warriors. I grew up in the Bay Area. They've always been my hometown team. But I appreciate all California teams, got to rep the home state.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the other leagues, kind of have a tie between the NFL and NHL for that second spot. I guess for the NFL, again, my logic pretty much applies to all other leagues, but my team in the NFL is the San Francisco 49ers, who thankfully won last night. In terms of hockey, I mean, clearly in the Bay, we've got the San Jose Sharks, and Jumbo Joe Thornton has been one of my favorite Shark players of all time. And also, the Sharks have one of the coolest logos, I think, in all of sports. And again, I grew up watching them, and I even recently had season tickets to the Sharks that I split with a buddy of mine. And honestly, if I could, I would have kept them, but times are changing. So hockey's up there for me. I think in terms of baseball, I'm more of an Oakland A's fan since I was able to go to more games when I was younger, and obviously it was a lot cheaper to attend compared to, let's say, going to a San Francisco Giants game. Uh, Plus, I really appreciate the team itself and what they've done in terms of the Moneyball idea and using different types of analyses in baseball. I mean, they were just so innovative.
Okay. So what would you say your favorite like memory as a kid watching sports, and like a favorite memory currently right now, like as an adult?
Oh man, I guess as a kid, I think my favorite memory was just being able to go to the renaming of Pac Bell Park in San Francisco to AT&T Park with my family. And I just remember going there with my brother, him really enjoying it. That was one of his first, I think it was his first baseball game ever. So being able to see him interact with that, uh, and him specifically, I remember this, and I talk about this in my classes, the effect of really advertising and marketing on kids and then inherently on their parents. So obviously at Oracle Park now, right, they have the big Coca-Cola slide, right? I'm sure you guys have seen that if you've gone.
Yeah.
And my brother, being, he's a little kid at the time, he went down it. He had a great time. And then as we were walking back to our seats, he turns to my dad and says, uh, "Dad, can I have a Coke?" Just the power of that, making your kid buy something, contribute to that for Coca-Cola, which I thought was just so funny. In terms of adulthood memories, it's got to be Clay Thompson's record-setting third quarter. I got a chance to go to that game with my best
Huh.
friend. We got to see it live, and wow, that the arena was just so electric. I've never been in a more intense environment. I was just so happy to be a part of history.
Do you think he'll be the same after his injury from last 2 seasons ago?
Yeah, I mean, coming back from knee injuries is really difficult. I think for Clay, he doesn't need to move around a lot with the ball. He's more of a spot up shooter. I don't think he'll lose that. So I think we'll see maybe a little bit of a drop off on defense, but his offense will be there.
For sure. Let's move on to some recent news for the NFL. We mentioned uh, some teams, some teams remaining undefeated within this past week. Um, what are some of your Week 7 predictions for this coming weekend of football? So some notable matchups is both undefeated teams, the Steelers and the Titans, are playing against one another. Division rivals, Panthers and Saints, are playing against one another, and they both have an even record last time I checked. The Browns and the Bengals, they also play. Seahawks and Cardinals, undefeated versus a rising team in the Arizona Cardinals. Tampa Bay versus Las Vegas, and the Bears versus the Rams.
Yeah, I think a lot of games going on this weekend. I'll start with really the matchup with the undefeated, with the Titans and Steelers. I mean, both teams are dealing with some injuries now, and I think the Titans have really impressed me lately. So I believe they're playing at home, so I'll take the Titans on that one. In terms of the other games, the Seahawks and Cardinals, I think I'll actually take the Cardinals with an upset. They've really impressed me in how they played, especially against the 49ers a few weeks ago. The Seahawks have really just skirted by in some of their most recent victories. I mean, last week against the Vikings was pretty close. Uh, I don't think they'll get away with some of the miscues that happened. So I'll take the Cardinals cautiously. Uh, some of the other games, the Browns and Bengals. I mean, the Browns kind of fell asleep against the Steelers. I think I saw an article title that the Steelers were the varsity team playing against the Browns. So it was like they're playing a real game for once. However, the Bengals, they're young. They have their rookie quarterback Joe Burrow, who's looked actually pretty good. But I'll have to take the Browns. That offense will pick it up. They'll find themselves this week, and that defense is actually pretty solid. So I'll take the Browns there. And then we got Micah's team, right? The Saints playing against the Panthers, division game. Saints are at home, and I think honestly the Panthers have been surprisingly average. I think they're outplaying themselves. They should not be a 500 team if that's their record. But I'll take the Saints, and I think they're at home, so I think that even adds to it. And then probably, I think my game of the week is the Bucks and Raiders. I don't know about you guys. I think it's a Sunday night game, so it's prime time. Two teams on the come up. We got Tampa Brady just leading that team. They look pretty good on offense. Defense was surprisingly good against the Packers yesterday. I'll take the Bucks, but for me, it's a bit of a toss-up. The Raiders have looked pretty good.
Yeah, and to kind of, you brought up the point of home field advantage for the Saints. This has just become a running topic since the the lower capacity with fans being in the stadium, such as like the Superdome, and where the Saints kind of thrive with that energy from the fans. Do you think that those that are in a Superdome area or have an enclosed stadium kind of don't benefit from there being fans or being a lack of fans?
Yeah, I think home field advantage is huge, especially I mean for the opposing team, with the noise environment or the noise factor playing a role in that. I mean, that's when you might see miscues occur between communicating certain plays between maybe the quarterback and the offense, or maybe the linebacker and the defense, or whoever the captain of the defense is at the time. So I think the Superdome is known as probably one of the loudest arenas, maybe all of sports. So not having that fan effect certainly will hurt them, but it's another level of comfort as well. Uh, I believe the Saints are just flat out a better team as well. So that's really what it comes down to for me. I mean, is a team good? Do they have to travel? If they're at home, I mean, if it's toss up game, I usually give it to the home team.
Yeah, I agree. Um, with so many unknowns since COVID happened or COVID started to happen within the U.S. Back in March, and with all the injuries that have been happening since the NFL started back in September, did you think that these many injuries would be the result of a non-traditional preseason slash training camp regimen?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I wasn't surprised. I mean, not having in-person training camps, I mean, really does a number on the body. So if you think about some of the players, they're just not in early season form, let alone mid-season form. It's just tough to adapt. So if you think about the amount of movements and actions that the players have to do during a game, it's just natural that this level of injury will occur. Just they don't have that level of preparation as in past seasons.
Okay, Chris, you can take over.
All right. At the beginning of the podcast, I brought up the World Series matchup between the Dodgers and the Rays. Who do you see is the favorite team, and who do you think is going to take home the championship this year?
So I'm kind of split on this because I think the Dodgers should be favored just based on the talent. I mean that lineup is killer. So I mean it's going to make for a fun World Series regardless. In terms of who would I like to see to win, I think I like the Tampa Bay Rays to win it all. I mean, just what they've been able to do with such a low payroll and efficient use of analytics, which I appreciate so much. And whether it's drafting, defensive shifts, I mean, opener strategies, they use biometric data. They collect a lot of information on their players. And you name it, they do it. So it make me pretty happy to see the Rays win. But my mind says Dodgers, my heart says Rays.
Okay, so speaking of these two teams, both of them played a game seven. Both the Rays and Braves kind of blew a large lead when they had a few games to clinch the CS series.
Mhm.
Um, what do you think was the downfall between these two clubs? Like the Tampa Bay Rays went up 3-0 and lost three straight, while the Braves went up 3-1, then lost three straight.
Yeah, I think for the Rays, maybe it was getting complacent. I mean, they were playing the Astros, who, with their scandal, the league kind of looks down upon them, doesn't really think they're legit. Maybe they thought they would take it away. They kind of got lackadaisical there. So I think just that level of intensity was kind of lost being up 3-0. You get a little bit too comfortable. For the Braves, well, I mean, Atlanta sports fans know this. Atlanta teams are famous for choking away leads when it when it counts. So I'm not surprised. I was sad to see that happen yet again. I'm sorry to play into the narrative, but yeah, the Braves just blew it. I think the Dodgers just flat out outplayed them, and they showed them what what it means to be a team that doesn't choke away leads.
Famous words of Peyton Manning after his SB speech, didn't want Atlanta to fall asleep halfway through the series.
Yeah, that appeared to happen. That's a perfect way to put it.
And then lastly, you kind of brought it up, the Astros cheating scandal. What did you think about it at first after allegedly they started to do it in 2017? And then I don't remember which coach left to go to Boston, but um,
Yeah, Alex Cora.
yeah,
Yeah.
just that string of events and then Boston winning and then Astros not winning last year against the Nationals. What do you think of that situation?
I mean, initially, to be blunt, I was really pissed off to hear that. I mean, I really respected what the Astros had done to get to where they were. I mean, it was despicable, right? Obviously, teams have to get creative to compete, but I don't think the Astros had to go to those lengths to win. And actually, for your listeners out there, there's a book by Ben Ryder. It's called Astro Ball. It details just all the painstaking efforts that the team took, and specifically their GM Jeff Luhnow, who ended up getting suspended, I believe, for the 2020 season. Just what they did to draft their talent, to get their talent, to earn that World Series win, or so we thought they earned. So it's really a shame that it ended up being all for naught. I don't think the MLB handled this situation well. I mean, personally, if I was the commissioner, I would have been much more heavy-handed with punishment. I probably would have even vacated their 2017 title. I don't think that was earned after what they did.
So you don't favor the commissioner giving immunity to these players to let them speak what really happened? You think they should have been actually punished and suspended for a handful of games?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, the public, we don't really know to what extent the players were involved. I mean, in my opinion, I think all the players were involved to some extent. Obviously, they were, especially the batters, they were getting the calls from the pitcher through the famous trash can, right? So they knew what was coming. That's really not fair. There's a difference between tipping your pitches and directly knowing exactly what's coming, right? So I think, if the commissioner should have probably looked into what the players were doing. Maybe they will. Who knows? I mean, this is a scandal, probably huge proportions, one of the worst modern ones, especially with the use of technology that was involved. So I guess there's a pause on that. We'll wait to see what happens. I mean, I'd like to think that people who deserve to get punished will, especially if they did something like this to hurt the integrity of the game.
Yeah, I agree 100%. That was going to be my next question is like, what did you think would they should have done? And I think that it should have been vacated or, in my opinion, let the Yankees win the AL and then have them go against the Dodgers, only because I'm a Yankees fan. But let's move on from there. So within the NBA, the Lakers made history winning their 17th national championship, tying that with the Boston Celtics. What did you think of this Lakers team and them winning the NBA championship?
Yeah, wow. This Lakers team really surprised me. I mean, before the pandemic hit, I mean, I thought it would take them a little bit more time to figure it out, and I honestly think maybe the pandemic helped them playing in the bubble. But overall, them winning, I think it was great for the city of Los Angeles. I mean, after losing Kobe Bryant in January, that city needed a win in terms of on the sports plane. And I think the Heat just they were overmatched. They got bullied. I mean, and plus the injuries that they sustained didn't really help. I mean, Jimmy Butler was a little bit gimpy. I noticed he had rolled his ankle one game. Goran Dragic was almost a non-factor, and then Bam, he was out for game two. So it didn't help. I mean, it's always nice to see a California team as well. I'm not personally a Lakers fan, but if I had to support one during the finals, it'd have to be the California team, right?
With free agency coming up and AD being on that free agency list, do you think he's going to resign or want to go somewhere else?
If I were AD, I'd probably follow LeBron and maybe do a 2+2 deal where he can opt out after 2 years, or maybe a 1+1 deal, which Kevin Durant, LeBron James have each done in previous years. So I'd stay with the Lakers and try to run it back. Depending on how this next season goes, if they're struggling to make the playoffs, or the internal factors are just not there, you start to think about leaving. And I've heard AD might consider Chicago being from there. That I'd like to see that. I mean, the Bulls haven't been relevant for a few years now. I mean, since really the fall of Derrick Rose and then the Tom Thibodeau leaving. So be nice to see the Bulls.
Yeah, I just hope he stays kind of to run it back. But I mean, if he goes to Chicago, that would be huge. Brings a lot of relevancy to that city since, yes, D Rose, but also since their last championship in '98. So
Yeah.
another championship contending team out in the East as well. One story that I kind of want to bring up, you brought this up within sports economics, which firstly, I didn't think you had in you, but when you first started talking like it, I'm like, that's the Bay Area guy in him. What is your beef with the Rockets general manager?
uh, there's no real beef. It's more of a disappointment in Daryl Morey, who actually recently stepped down as Rockets GM. Which kind of, I was surprised he stepped down. I thought he would get fired after just constantly not living up to the hype that the Rockets bring at each and every year. I mean, they're competitors for sure, but I think Daryl Morey gives analytics a bad rap, and I'm not sure what data he uses in his analyses or his team's analyses, but you're not going to win a championship with overly ball dominant players like James Harden and Russell Westbrook. It's never really been done to that extent with two players who need the ball so much and have such high usage percentages. I mean, small ball is one thing, and it can work in theory. I mean, the Warriors' original 2014-15 championship death lineup is, I think, a perfect example of that. So I guess I just don't agree with what Morey did in the past. And the moment you mentioned, I think I just lost it when he traded for Westbrook, who isn't a bad player. I really respect Russell Westbrook. He's former MVP. He is a great all-around player on offense. I just don't think he was a good fit for that system, especially with a coach like Mike D'Antoni. He needs efficiency, which I don't think Westbrook really brought to the table.
Yeah, when you started telling that story and when you started getting closer to the end, I'm like, who is this person? Like, who is this professor right now?
Yeah,
You
yeah.
never talk like that, and it's like it was a little surprising because you're super calm about everything. But then when you started getting to talk about the former Rockets GM, I was like, "Who are you?"
So
Yeah. It got me. It lit a match for sure.
So both the head coach and the GM for Houston has left. What do you see their future like?
Whew, I mean, after trading Westbrook, they really don't have much of a future when it comes to draft picks, so they're gonna have to wait. I mean, I I see them, being maybe a fringe playoff contender as a with the current makeup of their team. If I were the Rockets GM, I would probably get rid of Harden Westbrook, to be honest, and try to rebuild. I don't see them really competing that much. Maybe you'd keep Harden just because I think he's a little bit better. He's got a little bit more versatility on offense. Westbrook's he needs the ball a little bit too much. You could probably convert Harden to more of a off the ball player. I think he can do that because he is a great shooter. It's just he takes a lot of ill advised shots that bring his percentage down. But yeah, I see them as a fringe playoff team.
Do you think that James Harden's from California, right? I'm forgetting that. I think he
Yeah.
is.
I believe so.
Do
Yeah,
you
I think
think
he's
that
from
they
down
should
south.
both come home? Maybe go to visit the Lakers.
Oh man,
Do the Lakers have enough money?
They could.
I don't. I don't know. They probably could do it. I mean, the Lakers would gladly pay the luxury tax for a player like Harden. Maybe not Westbrook because LeBron needs the ball in his hands.
Yeah.
As we saw, AD. I mean, he can play off ball pretty well, and AD has turned into a really great shooter. But yeah, I don't think that's the right move for Harden or Westbrook to come to the Lakers or Clippers. I mean, the Clippers are another kind of head case. That's a dumpster fire just waiting to happen with all the players coming out and saying Kawhi's getting preferential treatment, and then they signed Ty Lue as their new coach, who I have a lot of questions about, compared to Doc Rivers, who's now with the 76ers, right? Should make for an interesting next season, though.
We can talk about this later, but last podcast or two podcasts ago, I want to say, we had an article bring up Embiid going to the Nets and like the analytics behind that about contracts, and like that would be super bad, but I mean, whatever Brooklyn wants to give up to get him. So the last thing, I was born in '98. Kris, you were born in '94, right?
Yes.
Okay, and then Dr. Sean, you were there to able to witness. I think what year were you born? In the '80s, right?
No, I'm a '90s baby.
Okay.
Yeah.
You were there to not, you probably wouldn't remember, but you were there to witness the last three-peat that Michael Jordan had in the late '90s. since LeBron won his 4th championship, um, you don't have to go into these specifics because we've gone through this in numerous classes. MJ or LeBron, greatest of all time?
I mean, do I even have to answer that,
I
Mike? You
guess
know
not.
my answer.
Yeah, I
It's
know.
it's gonna be MJ. I mean, LeBron, and I'm not. It's not a knock on LeBron. It's just Michael Jordan was that great. It's so great that almost looked like he was bored. I mean, if you guys watch The Last Dance, I mean, the amount of effort he went through, and he was a very different kind of leader from LeBron James. I think LeBron was, he's more of a camaraderie. He'll try to bring his team together, but Michael Jordan was more like, if you don't do this, you're going to get punched in the face kind of attitude, and it worked, right? Because he was that good. It was a different time for basketball in the '90s. I
With
got Michael Jordan.
Okay. Um, the reason I just bring it up, I mean, me and Chris looked at his stats after our last podcast or 2 podcasts ago, and just to bring up stats, not even championships. I mean, LeBron over Jordan is 3rd place overall in points leading, very high in the assists. I mean, he basically plays like a guard, and
Hmm.
that's kind of where the comparison like draws the line because he plays like a guard, but he's listed as a small forward, where Jordan was a shooting guard and a pure slasher. And also, like,
Right.
Jordan scored a lot more than his other teammates. And I mean, I haven't gone into specifics, but if you look into like the actual leaders for during that time, I think Scottie Pippen led with an assist and just getting it to Jordan. So I, I like saying LeBron only because I kind of am a LeBron fan. But when it comes to like overall play and like impact, I think it also is Michael Jordan as well. But that's just a pure feeling. Um, Chris, what do you think?
As I said, like countless times, it's always the era you grew up in.
Mm.
Because someone that's much older than all of us will say Bill Russell is probably the greatest, or someone else like they saw Wilt Chamberlain, because that's the person they saw, which changed the league. So you, me, Micah, we've been watching basketball since like LeBron, like heavily, and then Sean, you probably were watching MJ play like his last bit. So
Right.
I
Yeah.
would say like it's your generation, like who you see most of, like who's on TV a lot. You can always bring up stats, but it's always different for everybody growing up.
Yeah. So with every guest that we have on each podcast, we like to do a little thing where they rank different professional athletes. In this case, you went to University of Michigan, where
Oh yeah.
they breed a lot of football players. So we have a list of 10 former University of Michigan football players, basketball players, and other notable athletic
Stars.
figures that went to the University of Michigan. So let's start with like
Yeah.
10 and then go down to 1.
Okay. So you want me to give you my top 10
Yes.
athletes, right? So, you know, I thought about this, and my top 10 is really based on performance while at the University of Michigan, not necessarily during an athlete's pro career.
Mhm.
I think
Okay.
just to be fair,
Yeah.
I didn't do any special analysis, although I kind of wish I did. This is just more of my personal take, but hey, it would make for an interesting study, right?
Mhm.
And then the order is also a bit variable, but I think these 10 athletes have really made a great impact on the school. So I'll start off with number 10. I think Anthony Carter, AC. He was an All American wide receiver. He's probably been considered multiple times on Michigan football's Mount Rushmore for his impact on the game. Uh, at number 9, this is something that you guys included on your list. I've got Barry Larkin. I mean, we know what he did with the Reds later on in his pro career, but while he was at Michigan, he was an All-American baseball player, and he actually won Big Ten Conference Player of the Year twice, which is very impressive. Probably at number 8, I'll give it to Chris Webber. I know. He's probably, to me, was the most talented player on the Fab Five, even though he's always remembered for that mental lapse, trying to call a timeout when they didn't have any, right, in the '93 championship game. But he still stands as one of the greats to me. In terms of my number 7, is Jenny Ritter, and she actually played softball at Michigan in the early 2000s, and she was one of the most dominant pitchers in the history of Michigan, just not even just softball, but think about baseball as well. And she owned a lot of the records when she graduated. And something else that really puts her over the top for me is that she helped lead the team to a national championship in 2005, and they ended up winning. My number 6 will go mainly because of my immense love for ice hockey. I'll give it to Brendan Morrison. He led the team to a national championship win in 1996, and he won the Hobie Baker Award, which is, think of it as hockey's equivalent to the Heisman. It's given to the most outstanding player in the sport. And then now we're entering the top 5, so it's probably gonna be pretty similar to most people who went to Michigan. But at number 5, I'll give it to Glenn Rice. He helped the team win their only national championship in men's basketball in 1989, I believe. And I think he still ranks first in men's career points, which really shows his impact. And a lot of the times people try to compare the Fab Five to Glenn Rice and vice versa. But I really think Glenn Rice, the individual player, was something else in college. And then at number 4, and pretty much throughout my top 4 are going to be football players. At number 4, I've got Desmond Howard, just awesome receiver and return man. And he won a Heisman, and he's probably one of the greatest athletes that the university's ever seen. And then at number 3, I've got Tom Harmon. He was a running back who was the first Michigan player ever to win a Heisman, which I think got to put him up there. He did a lot for the school in that sense. And then at number 2, I've got Charles Woodson. He also won a Heisman, and he was the first. I think he still is the only primary defensive player, right, to win one. And yeah, that's wild, right? And he even helped the team capture their most recent national championship in, was it 1997? So yeah, it's been a while for the school. And then lastly, my number 1 athlete is Benny Oosterbaum. I don't know if you guys have heard of him. It's really just based on the history. He was a multi-sport athlete. He played football, basketball, and for those 2 sports, he was an All-American athlete. And then he also played some baseball too. So it was like he was Bo Jackson before Bo Jackson, except in college. And then he even came back to coach the football team for Michigan, and they ended up winning a national championship while he was at it. But I didn't factor that in. I just went performance in college. Yeah, that's my top 10.
That's a great list you got there.
List. With the ones that you left out that we have on the list, I mean, Tom Brady's off of it, Jalen Rose is off of it, Jim Harbaugh off of it, and one.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
Tom Brady, as we talked, Sean wants to just do performance at Michigan, like Tom Brady.
Yeah. I thought that the Sarah connection would have kicked in, but I guess not.
No, I mean Tom Brady. It's not like he was bad at Michigan. I mean, he won 2 bowl games. Yeah. He was like 20-5 as a starter. He was great. It's just not. I mean, he didn't win a Heisman. That's worse.
Oh yeah.
But he wasn't to the caliber of some of the athletes that I mentioned, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And I mean, Jim Harbaugh too. I mean, he was good, but I don't think he had that level. And then Jalen Rose, he's there. He's fringe top 10. Mm-hmm. But I just think talent in college is what set him apart from maybe like Chris Webber, if you think about it. And then even Glenn Rice, the other 2 basketball players on my list.
Yeah. We had Austin a few podcasts back just by himself. And the first initial question, what was the first initial question, Chris, that we always asked him?
Is he a bandwagon?
And when we had the list or ranked the top 20 all time from the professional athletes from the Bay Area, guess who we put as number 1?
I'm guessing Tom Brady.
Tom freaking Brady. And I'm like, how are you not a bandwagon at this point? But yeah, great. This is a great list, especially the ones that you added. I mean, there was only so many that I knew, and I was thinking just what I knew and hopefully what you knew. But you know a lot more than me, obviously. Yeah.
Don't sell yourself short. You got some good ones on there too.
So do you have anything else to say for the podcast before we end today?
No, I think I'm good, but I really appreciate you guys having me on again. It was fun.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. Micah, anything else?
No, that's pretty much it. Thank you. I will see you on Friday. We do have school.
Yes,
Um,
yes.
with that being said, guys, please subscribe to our channel. Click the push notification button right next to the subscribe channel. Share and like this video, and also comment down below the different articles that you want us to talk about and share. With that being said, guys, see you guys next time.